welcome to the September 17th, 2024 meeting of the 2229 Main Street Advisory Task Force. I'm the chair, Paul Bohm, and we'll start by calling the roll. Kurt Herman,
Here.
David Roby, here. Pam Rockwell,
Here.
Rich Beely,
Here.
Ann Hill,
Here.
Kurt Cook,
Here.
Carl Stein, here. Gary,
Yes.
Byron, and Paul Bohm. We're all here. Great, all nine of us. Terrific. So we just wanted to start off by looking at the agenda. Just give you. We have a busy agenda. That's for sure. So, first thing, we'll look at the minutes, a very brief summary of anybody who was at the September 4th site visit. It was not didn't turn out to be a public meeting of either the FinCom or the task force, but the select board was there in total, and others from DPW. So give you a little briefing on that. I want to discuss the draft motion, which is in your packet, and then the meat of the business is to go through the report sections. But before that, to discuss things on the logistics, a few things on report logistics, because we are in the home stretch. By the way, I've been invited to speak at the League of Women Voters meeting next Thursday with some other committee chairs, just sort of 8-minute update on what we've been doing over the summer and the challenges ahead, how we're wrapping it up. So we've got a lot to talk about here. I'll probably do that for the first time ever and with no slides. Kind of scary.
Paul, isn't there a board or a particular subcommittee who,
What's that?
at the league? I'm just
It's,
curious.
it's the kickoff meeting for the
Okay, got it. So,
So I
yeah,
think-
okay.
school committee, Warner's Pond Task Force, FinCom, our task force, and forget somebody else to invite, just to, a breezy update is what I'm gonna do. So let's talk about the September 3rd minutes, which hopefully you've seen. I can put them up on the screen, but any comments? I just have one, and that's Megan's last name was misspelled. It's 2 M's.
2 M's and 1 T or 2 M's and?
It's two M's and 1 T. Seems like your spell checker gets that. Gets that each time. Any other comments or Pam?
Pam just pointed out.
Eastland Woolen Mills, not Eastern. And I would appreciate it, Paul, you have the comments that you made about Carrie written down are they written down like handwritten, or are they,
They are written, handwritten.
I was just thinking maybe we could include the whole comments, or I don't know.
Anybody have any opinions, feeling about including those comments in the minutes?
I wasn't here, but it sounds like a good idea to me, member of the task force. I can imagine they were good comments.
They were very, I thought, Paul,
Nice comments.
you did a very, very thoughtful, nice
Yeah.
job.
Well, I have to give credit to Chris. Chris was my ghostwriter. So he did a very fine job. I did a very fine job of reading them. So, but they're heartfelt, I think, by all of us. I'll get to that.
If you can just send me a picture of it, there's no point in typing it twice, and then I'll just put it in.
Yeah, send that to you.
Thank you.
You know that. Any other comments on the minutes? Go ahead.
I move that we accept the minutes of September 3rd
Third,
as amended.
A second.
okay. Let's vote. David, aye.
I,
Rich,
Aye.
Pam Hill.
I think I wasn't here for that.
I believe you can still.
You can
vote.
still say aye or you can abstain.
Abstain.
Okay.
Okay. Corey. Carl. Gary.
Aye.
And Paul, I unanimous. The minutes are approved, accepted as amended, and I'll get you that information, Rich.
Thank you.
on the September 4th site visit, it's a beautiful day. There were probably, or how many, about 20 plus people.
Yeah, it was a
25
full
people.
house. That was
It was
impressive.
a full house. I think on the heels of the select board's visit to, let me take this one,
The DPW.
the DPW. There was some interest of DPW on the site. We'll talk about that in a minute. Select board was there in total, a few of us, and every time you go to the site, it's really changed. There's just an amazing amount of excavation that's been done and the holding basin, it's remarkable how fast the work is going. Still a lot to be done because the foundations are still covered in tarps. That has to be removed and that has to be dug out and sampled. So it's still work to be done, but it's going full speed. The only thing I heard a little bit different in Bruce's introduction is that he cited, he thought that the site would not be ready to develop until 2029. That's what he said, so that's probably a date we should probably, as good as any date. We thought it might be the end of 27, 28, but I think Bruce knows the pace. So if we're including that in any conversations or in writing, we probably should cite that. Bruce Thompson, personal communication.
And perhaps we should reference it as estimated and at every occasion,
As of
you know.
this date.
you know, to let people know that it's very much a work in progress.
I just was a learning experience for especially the select board and DPW. I heard, two things I heard during the visit. I heard that DPW thinks they need 13 acres for a site. I just heard that, just telling you what I heard, versus what they have at Kai's Road right now. And also Carrie LaFleur was looking around, she said, well, this looks like we're gonna put housing and recreational playing fields here. That was just a remark that she made, just because of the scale of the thing. And I said, well, Carrie, it's not to be in our report, just like that, we'll have a wider range of options, but it was just an interesting observation she had during that. Okay,
I was struck when we went around to the bog area that there seemed to be some new eyes seeing that. There seemed to be a, whoa, this is, wow, this is special, this is neat, but not an awareness of it as much. The visit seemed to raise awareness of the conservation part of the property, which was, I think, good.
Also got the sense with everybody I walked around with, oh gee, you could really do a lot here. I mean, I think a lot of those folks may never have been there and realized that, you know, there's a lot of flat land, there's, you know, I don't think we get a lot of objection to reuse for most of the people who are walking around.
anything else?
I think once again, Bruce brought a lot of information, but a lot of confidence in how he presented it, which always goes down very well for a new audience. I don't think he overstates it either. But
Yeah, I asked Bruce not to be too technical, and afterwards he said, was that too technical? And it was on the borderline. It was fine. You know, you can't talk about that side without being technical either about the remediation or the chemicals. You just can't talk about it. So I think he did a really good job. So I guess that's that. Okay. Next item of business, so I want to put up the draft motion for, so at the last meeting, as the minutes reflected, we had general consensus on the direction we were going. And you asked me to put together a straw man draft motion that we could take a look at, so this is what we're looking at here. So let me just read this to you. Tell you what I thought, why certain things were in here, why I think some things were not. So this is draft motion for discussion and consideration tonight and potentially voting on it. We'll talk about that. The 2229 Main Street task force recommends that the select board move forward on the path towards potential acquisition of the 2229 Main Street property. In order to both take advantage of the opportunities for meeting the needs of the town, as well as to more fully control the use of the property, the task force recommends that while final remediation is still underway at the site, the select board, one, formally expressed to the EPA an interest in potentially acquiring the property. Two, direct town council to enter into negotiations with EPA and DOJ to determine whether terms and conditions regarding financial matters and liability protection that the select board deems favorable to the town can be achieved. As part of this recommendation, let me move this. Sorry. As part of this recommendation, the task force also recommends that in parallel to the legal negotiations, the select board initiates a planning process through which the specific uses and costs of development at the 2229 Main Street property be determined. So I think that was sort of the general sense of the overall recommendation, and so the bare minimum we thought the select board should do. I think as far as the planning process at the end, I added that in there because at one point the select board actually suggested that we put that in there, and it's obviously something that we have discussed as well. But you know, certainly I didn't want to talk anything about the nature of the negotiations or the outcome. And I thought that the phrase that the terms that the select board deems favorable to the town is, you know, says, well, we don't know what those are gonna be, the financially or liability protections, or what those terms are gonna be, or the terms of negotiation of the liens, we just don't know. Those are all to be negotiated, so kind of this motion just leaves it at that. Any comments, questions, revisions?
Did you want to include liens in that sentence where enter into negotiations? Should that say lien holders as well?
Town council to enter into negotiations? I'm sorry.
The EPA and DOJ and lien holders.
Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines, Rich, and other parties, because we've got other public and private parties with whom we'll negotiate. We might want to, you just use a catch-all, because we don't know exactly with whom we're going to negotiate.
Other parties would include, for example, the Commonwealth,
That certainly, yeah,
which is not,
and at least one.
Citizens. And other parties, I think covers it.
Yeah, and other parties. We don't know who this is gonna be. Yeah, good point.
Relevant parties?
And other parties.
So I had a few, you know, just grammatical and sort of, you know, formatting changes, but I'll give it to you to look at. But the only thing that was substantive is, I wondered if, I mean, 2 points. One is, right now in the first sentence, you say for meeting the needs of the town. Can we say for meeting the multiple needs of the town? I mean, the point is that the site should not be used for one single thing, consistent with Envision Concord and, you know, synergistic approaches. You're supposed to be looking to utilize, to achieve multiple needs. So I would put the word multiple in there.
I have no objection. I don't think we need to add that,
No.
but, you know.
But I think it makes a point that.
Is that, anybody have any objections to add the word multiple to that?
Well, I like to acknowledge that there are many, many needs. Given the fact that we have other properties coming into play, I don't think we can declare we would want more than one use necessarily. I mean, I imagine we would, but why would we say that? And make that a declaration. We've got Peabody coming online, we have perhaps MCI coming online.
Well, we do have obvious needs at the site, which are like the environmental needs. And we're expecting, when we're suggesting we get it, we're suggesting that the town try to acquire it. We're suggesting that we want it for more than just an extension of our trails.
but that one's a given, so there's one.
So there's
About
one,
that.
but we're
We're
not,
not saying it has to meet local
Right,
needs,
right.
it's again, it's leaving language, but it's
just a flag.
planting the
It's just a
suggestion
flag, yeah.
that this,
yeah,
I think it's perfectly fine.
It's a small point, unless somebody has objections to it, I put it in there, because it doesn't, it doesn't require the town to look at multiple needs.
and the only other substantive point I had is in the last sentence.
But listen, indeed, the report is going to suggest multiple needs, so I want this to be consistent with what we have in the report, so.
You say you recommend the select board initiates a planning process, and I would change that to continues a planning process. I mean, we've already had two planning processes. I think you want to express a sense of continuity. We're not starting from ground zero.
Yeah, maybe,
Creating a planning process sounds.
yeah,
like-
maybe something's missing in there, but my intent was to a planning process beyond the site. Maybe that'd be to change the.
While you're struggling with the wording, I was gonna suggest that last sentence is a little bit beyond our intent and could be removed.
Well,
Jobs that have to plan.
yeah.
It's kind of pretty obvious, and in our reuse thing and so forth, we encourage them to think about specific ways and so forth. I understand why you added it, Paul, and that mention by the select board is a good reason enough, but it seems initiate a planning process for the possible uses and costs of the site. I don't think we need to recommend it. I think it's kind of as obvious as walking out of the building. Where are we encouraging?
I think it has one great value, and that is it flags immediately, don't look here for those kinds of recommendations.
Well, but also, I mean, I think the word in parallel, right?
Right.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
parallel, as opposed to sequence, that's the key, because, you know, we've talked about the time. So it's gonna take several years to negotiate, so we don't want, and if those are successful, we don't want the planning process to start at that point. So I think the parallel piece is really the important part of that.
And the further we get in the planning process, before the site is fully remediated, the more opportunity we have to potentially influence.
If it's really supposed to be in parallel, why not make it a third recommendation? 1, 2, and 3,
Mhm.
continue the planning process to determine.
should we actually be saying more about the planning process, that it needs to be part of the integrated
Yeah,
planning process that's going on for the town?
That's what I was thinking, integrated with efforts for MCI, town facilities. And town
I
facilities.
don't quite get the initiate, and then continuing, I think we're initiating a planning process which carries with it a lot of important elements that didn't previously exist, like liability issues and lien resolution and, I've never received you're talking about the 2021 report or?
The 2021 report had a section talking about liability issues.
It did.
Our report is gonna have a more detailed, more nuanced discussion of liability issues. I think a continuation of the planning process ought to go into it in even more
What
detail.
if you say to initiate a process to continue?
I don't know that I want more of it to say, include it in the planning for the town. In other words, it's not that you're necessarily initiating a process that's about the individual pieces. It's just like every other property the town is looking at right now, MCI, Peabody, potentially Kai's Road if they move the Kai's Road facility somewhere else. You know, all of those things kind of need to be considered together.
The reason I had, and it was really, if I had the word multi-site planning process here, through which specific uses of the site could be properly determined, that was my intent here. And that's what the select board is, so, you know,
Yeah,
let me just, this is a. maybe
Well,
this-
I agree with you, but I think it's important enough, this should really be, I agree, this should be point 3.
It is three, I just
Yeah.
changed
I
it.
mean, it,
So let me read that, so. Direct town council, negotiations, express intent, direct town council. And then, important words, in parallel to the legal negotiations, initiates.
think if you just bullet them, it'll be easier to
Yeah, well,
read.
initiate a multi-site planning process through which specific use and cost of development of the 2229 Main Street property can be determined. That was my intent, is to, this has to be planned, and not in isolation.
Yeah,
And so,
no.
look, everybody knows that, but I.
Right,
I
but so
think-
then I would come back to David's point, is it beyond our remit to like, they asked us to make a recommendation about this site, and now we're coming back to them saying, you need to initiate.
A and B, as you just said, everybody knows this.
Yeah.
The select board's already talked about it.
We did think they knew that after we wrote the reuse report too.
Yeah.
I second the point commented, which was that this one can kind of get forgotten, this property can kind of get forgotten with other properties being prioritized and this one not getting cleaned up, so here's us encouraging them to keep it on the drawing board, and I have no strong feelings about this, I just
How about-
wanted to put these thoughts on the table.
How about include, instead of continue or initiate, include 2229 Main Street in a multi-site planning, because they've already started a multi-site planning process. And
They have?
absolutely, I went to, I mean,
Is the
MCI
MCI, is the MCI?
Yes, MCI is. one
and I've
plan.
spoken to
Keep
the
it-
Warner's
keep
Pond
it
Task
as a-
Force, and the Warner's Pond Task Force says we are coordinating actively with them, so.
Yes,
It's those
and
two sides.
Overstated.
And we know the town's commissioned a facilities too, which is due what, the end of the year, I think?
But that's a different issue.
Well, it is and it isn't, because if it says you gotta rebuild, then where are you gonna rebuild?
Yeah.
Right, it has to consider sites, but it's.
I said we're debating something in there which is not harmful, but let me tell you why it's in there. I don't know how many times the FinCom has asked me, what are you gonna do with the site, how much it's gonna cost? And I keep saying, we don't know, because we have to plan. And we, as a task force, are anxious to figure that out, because we're recommending this site to be used.
Right.
So I think it's really the part of our
Also, you think about
recommendation.
what we're going to pay for the site is dependent on what it's gonna cost to improve the site to make it usable. So if you don't have a better understanding of what it's gonna cost you to build the infrastructure for the site, you don't know what you're going to pay to acquire the site.
You hit it on the head. You've got 2 years of negotiation. Before the select board decides to pull the trigger, they have to know how much it's gonna cost to develop the site. They may walk away based on the number that's just too big. I'm not sure that's the case, but I think they need to know that
They need to know.
before they actually acquire the site. I'm sorry, FinCom, out of turn, but go ahead. No, it's okay.
Oh, I just wanted, you mentioned that the FinCom was asking about
Yes.
costs. And I have communicated to Eric that because of the way in which the property is currently held, there's no way to know for the foreseeable future until negotiations begin.
Right,
And that, numbers may not be available for 2 years, so I am recommending to him that we just take it off of our calendar for this year. I mean, I think that's what I'm hearing here, is that there really is no way to, come up with costs.
For this year, yeah.
For this year.
No,
I think you're
Okay.
absolutely right.
sorry.
Because the town's not
let's-
gonna be-
This is, let's keep it to the task force, we need to decide on whether this last phrase is, and let me just say how I changed it again. Number 3, in parallel to the legal negotiations, include the site in a multi-site planning process through which the specific use and cost of development of the property, development of the property can be determined.
Instead of through, how about being during which? Because basically you want to include them in the multi-site planning process that's gonna be the other sites at the town, and there's gonna be a lot of stuff that's gonna be determined.
I think through is the right word,
Okay,
because it's the outcome is
Okay.
through. So, can we,
Yeah,
think about what's written up here and, I understand why we may not need it, but I think it's important.
Reinforcing what our report said,
Given our,
I get that.
yeah, it's reinforcing.
Yeah.
And to Carl's point, I think the decision on ultimately, this is after after we don't exist, the select board's gonna have to make a decision based on
And,
what they can use it for and how much it's gonna cost.
and it might help in the negotiations with the federal government to say, well, if we acquire the site, it's gonna cost us this much to improve it, so.
It may help during the time for the town to a private party.
Yeah.
Who shows interest and also there's revenue to be generated. I think it's actually important.
There's one other thing that I think ought to be here, maybe others don't agree. I think we need to say the town needs to initiate a process to rezone for the uses found potentially desirable and feasible in this report. In other words, at the moment, it's restricted industrial. And so housing, a lot of the things that we might want there are not currently zoned. I don't think I mean, to me, it should be inclusive. Not everything that's permitted should be what the town finally does. But if we get to the point of deciding what we want there, and then have to go through a 2-year process to rezone it, we've pushed everything.
This is
further.
not gonna be the extent of the recommendations of the
Can-
board, is it?
Can I,
This is the main recommend, well,
Well, I mean, and I understand, this is
this is section, there's gonna be a section I haven't written yet on next steps. There are a couple of next steps in here, but I mean,
so I feel like this is responsive to our charge, but I think we're gonna have a whole nother section that, where I agree with you, but I think that fits later,
I call them next steps or other recommendations. or ancillary
If it's in there, I think.
Just a second, let me just, I think that anything on zoning comes out of the planning process.
and it's already in our
Yeah.
section 5.
It's, I don't think it has to be in the motion.
I think it needs to be in the next steps.
it is zoned for residential uses. The kind of zoning that it has is the same zoning. It basically. Forest Ridge Road and Star Met were the same zoning type.
I think it's like
And the
combined business
special,
residential.
the special, you can have residential in the along Forest Ridge Road if you get a special permit to do it. EPA looked at that when we had the Star Met zoned the same and said, well, that's too much of a hurdle to get to. And it got changed so that the Star Met site requires town meeting approval instead of the zoning board of appeals approval or something like that.
The
But
specific
it
zoning
is,
now,
it is
notwithstanding,
specifically,
I think it's combined business residential, but that notwithstanding, there's still, he's right. There's a wide variety of zoning changes that we as a committee, I believe, will be recommending. And I think it's an appropriate recommendation that that zoning package be moved in parallel, but.
where did I see
But
it?
I'm comfortable with Paul putting it in the next set.
Yeah,
Yeah, so, I have the title section of next steps, or could be next steps on other recommendations. But I think this one captures the main recommendation we can vote on.
you're wondering where the zoning.
Where is the zoning?
It's an
Yeah.
annex from section 5. If you read
Oh,
chapter
okay.
5.
Okay, and I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, the annex is in here.
Do you want me to read this again? Everybody? Hmm?
Might I suggest that liability protection be plural? We do make a big deal of layers of protection, we might as well headline it in this intro, but.
What do you want to pull?
Liability protections instead of liability protection.
Protections? Oh, plural.
Yeah,
It's not a big deal.
Yeah, that's true, there's more than one. Okay, so so this is what I call it's a conditional recommendation as opposed to, we'll talk about one of the chapters where I actually had a recommendation that we didn't really discuss, that we acquire the site tomorrow. I put that in there because it's not feasible and I want to explain why it isn't. So the conditional recommendation to acquire is just getting on a pathway. I think that's the essence here, and then, I think those 3 steps are specifically important.
Oh, I would be comfortable if you read it as amended and we voted on it tonight.
Well, it's up here as amended, so let me read it again so you can think about it. The 2229 Main Street Task Force recommends that the select board move forward on a path towards potential acquisition of the 2229 Main Street property. In order to both take advantage of the opportunities for meeting the multiple needs of the town, as well as to more fully control the use of the property. This task force recommends that, while final remediation is still underway at the site, the select board, one, formally express to the EPA an interest in potentially acquiring the property. Tip at the end. Two,
Yeah,
direct town council to enter into negotiation with EPA and DOJ and other parties to determine whether terms and conditions regarding financial matters and liability protections that the select board deem.
I think board is singular.
Deem favorable,
Do you
deem favorable to the town can be achieved.
make town capital?
Well, okay, yeah. Down. Three, parallel to the legal negotiations, include the site in a multi-site planning process through which the specific uses and costs of development at the 2229 Main Street property can be determined.
I would move that motion.
can you make it three bullets instead of a
Yes.
run-on sentence, like,
I promise I'll make it 3 bullets, because
just easier to focus on.
if I
like,
change it
there's
here,
three
I'm
there.
likely to screw up format, it'll take us 10 minutes. I will,
Yeah, comfortable.
it'll appear as bullets certainly. Rich, you saying?
No, I was just saying I would move that motion. But maybe Carl has a comment.
Well, I'm just, we haven't seen the full report yet, and we haven't seen the legal section of the report yet, so I wonder if it's appropriate to vote on the recommendation before having seen that.
I think it is appropriate to the recommendation. I think you haven't seen the legal section, unfortunately, but what don't we know?
What about the problem of,
What don't we know that would change this? And we're saying the town has to negotiate liability protection for financial matters.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, there's no stop.
assuming the legal section reflects the discussion we had with council, but we haven't seen it. It just seems a little unusual.
I want to speak to it if I may. I'm entirely in favor of this, but not now, because I don't want to have a conversation with anybody about how our process was, in anybody's mind, tainted by the fact that we had voted prior to having the full draft. And I'll take responsibility for the delay. We've been struggling for a couple of weeks to get some specific guidance. It's forthcoming, Paul, what, hours away? I don't know, but we're close.
But we can't finish the report until we vote, we have the recommendation.
I don't think our.
I would like to vote on whether we're going to move this tonight. So can somebody make a motion to move? No, he made a motion. He made a motion to vote on this. I want to somebody make a motion to actually move forward.
can I ask, I'm troubled by not having seen the entire report, not just the legal, but just digested the entire report, and there are questions of tone as well as actual outcomes, so it is possible that the report will have elements with respect to tone or perspectives that would cause someone who is in favor on the face of it to want to concur maybe with a
Okay, give me an
comment.
example. I need an example.
An example would be if we're too rosy about certain outcomes, and the way it reads makes a member of the task force uncomfortable, although this member certainly thinks that we're moving in the right direction, because I can't see myself
I'm
going.
just asking, I'm questioning, does anybody here believe that we won't be able to move a conditional recommendation, whether we vote on a,
Well,
no?
but then I'm not
Based on what we know.
speaking to I'm just asking a question about, you see the totality of the report, and I can't anticipate what the problem might be. It might have to do with tone, where somebody says, yeah, I agree with the outcome. I have some quibble with the way we're presenting it. I mean, I haven't thought it through, but I know that it's very common to have reports where you have.
I'm saying not understanding the quibble.
So I want to point out that I do not think of this as a dependent on the report at all.
Right.
This is the recommendation that the committee is making based on everything that we have learned. All the conversations, all the discussions, all of the studies that we've done, all the writing that we've done up till this point. It's not like the report is justifying this recommendation, not the other way around. So there's nothing about coming up with the final report in order to
I
make the
agree that this
recommendation.
isn't necessarily dependent on the report. Is the report, you seem to be implying the report is dependent on us voting on this now. What's the?
There are a couple of sections of the report I can't complete, we can't completely do this. The recommendation section, next step section.
Yeah,
What
next
do we
steps.
wait, wait 2 weeks to vote on this?
Right.
I mean, what's the cost to the committee of waiting till a full draft? of the
You
legal
can
draft
definitely finish.
and the full report?
I think you can draft sections of the report that outline next steps, knowing that everybody seems to be heading in the right direction or feeling comfortable with what you've put on the
I think it's
paper.
not the perception issue, really, from my point of view, not a
So
substantive issue.
let me just say, the report's not gonna, we haven't looked at the schedule, the report's not gonna be done, and we will not be in a position to vote on acceptance of the report for at least a month, if not longer. Are you suggesting that we wait till we vote on acceptance of the report for the recommendation?
No,
So
but
at what
not
point,
necessarily.
at what point,
when we've had drafts, when we've seen all the drafts of the report sections.
so it's a legal
I-
section, it's a legal section that you'd like to see.
Well, for me, it's just the next steps and it's the tone of the thing, it's the totality of the document, and it's awkward in my judgment to be making a decision with, unless we can concur with comment or something, but I don't even know how we're going about what it means to vote for this yet, you know, I mean, I think.
But you don't know how, who needs to vote on it?
When you vote on this, you vote without the opportunity to subsequently concur with comment, or is this unanimous? I don't know what our plan is with respect to voting on this and what it means, and I also am quite concerned about not seeing the whole report, not just the legal stuff, but also the next steps and recommendations, those are important elements. And I don't know, frankly, Paul, I don't know what
I honestly
why
think
we're on fire with this. We have, I think we were told originally by Terry that if we needed a few more months or we needed a little more time, we could have it. So I don't understand why we're on fire to get this.
We have a motion that everybody thinks is acceptable. I'm not sure what any objection is to voting on the motion, other than we haven't seen the report.
Exactly.
But to Pam's point, we have deliberated, we have reviewed, we have met with town council, we have all the knowledge that we need. We don't need to read the report. There's nothing gonna be in the report to surprise anybody. We have all the knowledge that we need.
It's not even that I'm saying the report is justifying our recommendation, not the other way around.
But there are elements of the report that I've certainly not seen that I don't know what they're going to actually say, including the recommendations and the next steps. How we decide in the end to draft the legal material, based on town council's, advice to us. I don't know, I think it's strange to be doing this right now. I'm happy to do a straw thing and say, yeah, sure, I would vote yes for this as a preliminary, you know.
In the last meeting, which we weren't at, we reached a consensus on a conditional recommendation to acquire the site. I was asked to put some words behind that. There's nothing, this is not a mysterious invention of the chair.
Yeah, and I guess I'm sort of with Pam, I think we should be reviewing the report with does it support our recommendation? Is it hedged in the appropriate places? But I'd hate to go back to all this wording again. So what I'm thinking is, what about a motion, something like this? That subject to the opportunity to review and revise the entire report document, the language below reflects the current recommendation that will be proposed by the task force.
Why are we bending ourselves backwards to try and do, why do we need the motion now? Why don't we just continue to draft?
I'm just trying to. sort it out.
Include it as draft language in the report, and then
I would like to move this in 2 weeks, not now. I don't think there's anybody waiting over the next 2 weeks for this to get our formal approval. I think everybody's happy with it. You use the word perception, I believe, if you and I are on the same wavelength, I simply don't wanna have the side conversation, how did this task force produce its formal final recommendation prior to even seeing its full draft? Why don't we just make that impossible for somebody to criticize our process by seeing our stuff before we vote the recommendation?
But only part of our report is about the findings that we had in advance. The rest of it is talking about this recommendation.
We
So
have,
what is-
we have
is that explained?
we have deliberated on these points. The deliberation,
It's not,
Towards the
that's
recommendation.
not the question, Paul. I'm not concerned about where we come down. I think we all come down right here. I'm concerned about, the potential, for criticism about our process, that we brought home the final recommendation before we brought home the final draft. I just would prefer to avoid that conversation with any of our constituents.
And I will-
the recommendation has to be agreed by the task force before we can finalize the report. It's a chicken and egg thing. You're saying, let's write the report, then make a recommendation. No, I'm saying we make the
What I'm
recommendation
saying is I
and then
will
we write.
read the report in draft and see it before we actually do a finalizing version of this. I don't,
So
and I have both, I think perception is key. I think it's not common that you would, at this particular moment, do a formal vote on something like this. And I also have some questions about the way the thing is gonna read in its entirety, and I wanna be carefully assessing that and deciding and knowing what it means for me to say I'm voting on the motion. Will I have a chance to have a concurring opinion or not, if it comes to that? I just don't know why we have to do this right now. And why this whole business is on fire. I mean, we can take our time on this if we.
I don't agree. I want this task force to come close to meeting, its deadline, which we're not gonna meet. And I'm not gonna ask for, probably more, we'll talk about that. I'm not gonna extend this thing beyond,
Why, can you explain? I ran the energy future.
because we don't need to extend this.
But
Well,
We don't need, we have drafts of reports that everybody has looked at. You've seen all the drafts, and the only one you haven't seen is your own section. So I'm not sure what you haven't seen.
I made this, but I haven't seen the next steps and all that.
The next steps can't be written until we make the recommendation. This is chicken and egg thing.
yeah, it can. You can put down draft language and we can review it and we can say, okay.
But the assumption is that this is the recommendation in order for anything else to be written except the legal section. Right now, the only section that we haven't seen that,
Make that assumption.
and our assumption from my perspective is that the point of the legal section, the reason it is taking so long is because information that was given to this committee in executive session that might be privileged information has to be carefully written in the legal section. It's not going to say anything surprising and new. It is, and if it does, then we're gonna say, hey, change it back to what we know and not.
I can see to use the word tonal, I can see tonal differences in the report that could be disturbing to somebody like me. I'm all for us ultimately making this decision, and my basis is basically our stewardship responsibilities. But I think I'm there. I am not comfortable buying into something that I don't know exactly what I'm buying into, and I don't know whether I have an opportunity to state a contrary view while concurring in the outcome. I just don't, and I don't understand why we're on fire with this. I just don't get it.
May I ask you a question, Paul? Were we to follow Richard's basic idea
Which is
of conditionally approving this pending the 2 week review, final review of the report?
It's not gonna happen in 2 weeks. The final it's not gonna happen in 2 weeks.
Well, then
we
we
release the money
say,
Winner.
before this,
but we,
before we can look at the whole report and say.
approving this on condition so that you can start the drafting, said this chicken needs to be laid before the egg, et cetera. If we were,
So,
sorry, egg, chicken across the road. If we were to
Start crafting.
I'm trying to move things forward here by proposing that we conditionally do what Paul is asking, pending the concerns of the rest of the committee.
So-
And they compromise to move the evening
thank
forward.
you, so we conditionally approve the conditional recommendation.
So,
Anybody wanna make a motion to that?
I would like.
We have other business to take care of here, and I think,
I would like,
I won't say anything more because I won't make it out of this meeting alive.
so, 2 weeks.
I mean, what if you have half of us voting against you just because you're forcing this?
I'm not forcing it, I'm,
But you are,
I'm-
you're telling us we have to have a vote tonight.
right now, I'm telling you that, the motion, the conditional approval of the conditional recommendations on the floor.
What happened to, this one? This was a very well.
What was that one?
Yeah, Rich's, I was supporting Rich's idea, basically.
Rich is good, Rich.
Move that the following language reflects the findings to date of the committee, and would indicate the recommendation, but will not be finalized until all parties have had a chance to review them. For all members have had a chance to review and debate.
So,
I second that.
So it's been seconded, Matt, by the state judge?
So we have a motion, which I hope you could write down.
I'll try.
We have a second, any amendments, any discussion?
Question, would we not be better off in the long run, and even in the short run, if we made a much more declarative, not so tentative sideways recommendation in a mere 2 weeks?
Yeah, it seems to me that this is no different than our straw poll.
Okay.
Yes.
We already did a
If
straw
you'd like to
poll.
look toward,
So-
we're not gonna be in 2 weeks, we're not gonna be, we have the same discussion. The report's not gonna be finalized, parts.
We didn't say finalized, it won't be finalized until we finalize it, but you'll have all the drafts in place, and you'll be able to see the report in its entirety, and we will not be exposed to the potential criticism. You declared the outcome before you did your homework. Now, I don't believe that's true, I just don't wanna hear that perception.
I would
And-
actually,
And why would I open up that door for such a tentative, conclusion tonight, that we're gonna have to revisit more, directly later on
Well,
anyway?
you said something interesting there, Court, if I may, just
Yeah,
for
please.
discussion's sake. Why would we open ourselves up to approving something before we've done our homework? We've done our homework.
Yeah.
We've done our homework. We've done our homework, I can't say it enough. We have not read the language and the tone of the final close draft of the report, true. But if anybody asked me the question you're worried that we might get asked, I would tell them, we did that based on our homework, now we're just writing up the homework. We have done our homework.
I don't believe you've received the legal section.
No, that's correct, but I did hear the presentation on which that's going to be based. So I'm personally, myself, I'm satisfied, I will be able to answer somebody in the street, wait, you didn't write a report and then you recommended
But
it?
how do we benefit, Dave?
This is just me.
How do we benefit from doing this tonight in this way? That part is still.
so I'm gonna
Because
suggest
that
that
made me have stuff to do.
it would be really nice to put into the agenda of the meeting where we vote on this recommendation, the wording of this recommendation, and to mention that we're actually having a vote about it. So we finalized this wording, let's put it in on the agenda for 2 weeks. You seem confident that the legal information will be there in 2 weeks.
Can I make just an adjustment?
Okay, we're not gonna be in a position 2 weeks from now to do this.
Say not to.
I know that for a fact.
Yeah, right.
Is prepared.
When committee members have had an opportunity.
Reviews.
I don't know if I need the final draft, it's gonna go through.
The full
It's gonna fold.
A full draft. I mean, 2 weeks is, tricky thing.
No,
But again, you're taking recommendations and legal are the two things you're waiting on. And the recommendation has to be based on the commitment that this is what our recommendation is gonna be.
and the next step.
Essentially
The
done.
The
next
next
step.
steps, and Tom,
Okay, I sense a discomfort. I sense that we probably should table this for 2 weeks and revisit it.
yeah, that's.
But as opposed to taking any motion right now, I think. This is
But I think
gonna,
we wanna put
This
this
is-
motion in the,
this is gonna be in the minutes,
in the minutes.
we are considering this, that's fine. I wanna get to the schedule, because in 2 weeks, we're not gonna be done with this report. Okay, but the legal section is not gonna be done in 2 weeks in this report, I'm telling you right now. So, and the other section still may be in various points of revision. So you're not gonna have the final product to look at, so will you be more comfortable voting on it? We'll see in 2 weeks,
Yeah,
okay?
great,
We'll see in 2 weeks, okay?
that's a good outcome, Paul.
Paul,
So-
thank you.
Okay.
But I also think when we finally do vote on it, we need to actually announce that we're gonna vote on it in our agenda.
Well, technically, we should anyway.
Yes.
I actually checked on that with Chris and with the town, and we don't have to say vote on it. It doesn't have to be an agenda to vote on it.
Okay.
But,
But,
I mean, if I put it on the agenda next week, we may not vote on it.
and this
I'd
will
like to
be
put
the
it on any
minutes,
agenda.
so people can see what we're gonna vote.
Okay, let's save this thing. Cool. Okay. So. Report, first thing in the report is I propose. Proposal to dedicate this report to Perry Flood. I think, there was a version of this written in, I think in the packet you had, I mentioned to Chris and Megan, that I thought this was a good idea, and I just drafted something, but I have an alternative draft that I want you to consider. So my proposal is to report dedication. Right, this report is dedicated to the late Carrie Flood, a longtime resident of Concord, who provided over 35 years of dedicated service to the town and who served on this task force until her passing in August 2024. We honor her civic passion, a long service to the town, and her contributions to the task force's efforts. Something happened to me.
I really like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I think that would be a great.
We're okay with that, so
Put it in the draft.
okay, so that'll do.
Throw an apostrophe in on task forces.
Yeah, it's a posture.
That's very nice.
Could we have a vote on this?
Make a motion to accept it as amended.
Second,
Aye. David Grumpy,
Aye. And well,
Rich,
Aye.
Pam,
I,
Gord, Carl, Gary, Kurt, Paul, okay.
Kurt.
Kurt, oh.
Aye.
Kurt, yeah.
Aye.
We have Nick's here debating the motion, I forgot. Okay. Did you say aye, Kurt? Kurt, if we're gonna look at it. Okay, let's get to the report. First thing I want to share is, a proposed change in schedule for the report. Propose a few things here. Am I sharing this? Can you see this, Kurt?
No,
Report schedule, okay.
nope,
no.
no, can't see it.
Yes, okay, then let me figure out what I'm probably not sharing. Yeah, that's fine. Yep,
external reviews.
Okay, so, with the various sections moving around and with the various needs to review and resubmit and revise, and with, external reviews by town council and staff. And with the need to produce this report and editing, I'm proposing this schedule here. So this is crossed off because we've accomplished, all of this without the legal section, so we're at 9:17, so we're at the task force meeting. We decided to table the recommendation. We hope to discuss some of the sections here, except the legal section, the recommendations, and the next steps. And I do want, if we don't get to it tonight, I do want each of you to identify the appendices that you'd like in here, and we need to collect those. And I will say, just as a side on the appendices, that less is more. If we can refer to a website, or if we can refer to some other source. If you need to have an appendix here because you think it's material, such as some of the meeting notes that were behind your discussions with other towns or with staff in town, I think those are material. So let's, so digressing. So this is what I'm proposing. I haven't discussed this with Pam in the court, but so hopefully by the 20th, which is the end of this week, and basically the report, you want to explain why the report hasn't been submitted?
Yeah, I'll ask Chris and Pam to weigh in as you wish, and you too, Paul. 2.5 weeks ago, we had our first draft, and it relied extensively on chunks from town council memos. Our purpose was to, one, flag the fact that we didn't want to reword his work if in fact we could go to the source. And two, it was our way of saying how much of this is released and to whom. Paul rightfully was kind of anxious about the then delay. Pam and I went back and worked the report, dropping a lot of the town council material out, trying to shave it off as best we could.
By the way, the initial intent was not for it to be reviewed at all. The larger initial draft, as it were, was more to get the attention of the town council and the town manager to help us learn what was the more kind of extreme example that would be, could you put all these memos into the appendix? So to know how much freedom we had to pick and choose among various parts of the existing memos. And that was the sole intent of that original document. And then Paul became involved in it in a way that we didn't expect, and wanted us to pare it down, which we said, okay, we'll do that. And what went back to the town for review was a shorter version of that original document.
Jumping to the present, Chris informed us today, Pam, me, Paul, that the decision now is on the town manager's desk, number one. Number two, that she knows there's some urgency about it. And number three, what that decision is in effect her guidance and that of town council as to what remains privileged and what doesn't, what would constitute a revealing negotiation strategy, which we wouldn't want to do. So as soon as we get that guidance, is that the essence of it? As soon as we get that guidance, and I think it's going to be very soon. Carrie knows it's that we're waiting, that Pam and I are on the hot seat to get this work done. I think with luck we can meet end of week. But it depends on a few things, but we're shaking your head affirmatively. You told them that we can get back to it sometime later this week. So by next week, we've got a third iteration of this that town council and town manager have weighed in on. We thought this was gonna go through Chris and Megan. Megan is our primary, technically our point of contact with Mina Macarius. But I think this, through conversations that I wasn't part of, got elevated to town manager directly, which I think is all to the good. Gotta reach her anyway at some point.
Thanks. Ed, any comments?
Just a question, Court. Are they now reviewing your draft, or are you waiting to hear from them, or are you gonna have to go through another draft when they say, oh, no, you can't use this?
Well, town council has advised that the town manager has the authority to waive privilege on protected documents. So, a recommendation has been sent to the town manager on what should remain privileged and what can be released. And she's considering the recommendation.
And that recommendation came from you primarily, is that right?
Yeah, kind of a little bit with staff and town council.
Good.
But I guess my question is a citizen reading this thing is, can we say the things that we know to be true, even if we can't use the citations? In other words, based on everything we heard, we're optimistic about these things. We don't want to give away a negotiating position, but can we say in our judgment, based on what we have heard, it should be, possible to deal with the liens, all that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I think the expectation is the town council is gonna basically confirm what is in the scope of what can be discussed, what can be in the legal memo, so.
And all I would add to that, Rich, thankfully, much of what we're dealing with is not unique to Concord. That
Is what?
is not unique to Concord or this site.
Yeah.
It's about the law that applies to any number of.
No, I'm just wondering two things. One, do you and Pam have enough time to redo it if essentially you get told a lot of the, technical material you've relied on can't be released? And then number two, if it can't be released, can we say the things that you were gonna say with that backup, without the backup?
I think that one of the reasons we were quoting extensively and would have quoted less extensively was because it is better to have the accuracy of the lawyer speaking to this stuff. We can certainly make very summary comments and summary conclusions, but then the question becomes, well, how much would interested citizen want to know what's underneath all of this? And the best way to get that information out is using the very language of the town council. So I'm personally inclined to be reliant on town council to the extent we can, but also to put things into plain English to make sure that we get, we don't get so many leads on legalities that it's difficult for the public, but.
Yeah.
So is your concern that you would be publishing a memo, making public a memo where you're only using part of that memo?
Well, if it's a privileged memo, that's the problem. I mean, but if it's not privileged, I think the sky's the limit. It sounds like Mina is now, and this has not been clear until very recently, that I'm sorry.
No, please.
The material is basically non-privileged and that we can use it to the extent that we want to. How much we want to directly quote or not becomes a question of how we address it when published.
Yeah, I'd like to move on, but I want to make one statement. I don't mean to be argumentative, but it's gonna sound like it. To Rich's point, I believe the whole chapter could have been written without citations. Based on referring to information that is publicly available, or we have been told which is not privileged. The various pathways that are available for liability protection, the various options for acquisition. And importantly, the fact that anything in this chapter is subject to negotiations later on. There's nothing that's in there and we should say that, it's nothing that, we're telling the select board, based on what we know about financial matters, liens, liability protections, we believe that the town council should proceed to negotiations. Because we have every reason to believe that those could come out favorably, not guaranteed. None of that, I don't think, has to be said with quoting anything that's privileged. And just one thing, I haven't seen anything that's strategic in anything. We haven't revealed, there's no negotiating position. There should be, I'm agreeing there's nothing in that said, we're gonna take this negotiating position with EPA. I mean, here's an example. The forgiveness of the liens, we know that that's subject to negotiations. We're not gonna present a position in there. We're gonna say that has to be negotiated. Moving on. So,
Can I?
and I'm gonna need to see the chapter. The chair's gonna review the chapter, and there'll probably be some changes that are recommended, so I'm a little fearful that we're gonna go through this. Another set of revisions and reviews by the staff and town council, and until we're all on the same page.
You could do Superfund 101.
I'm sorry?
You could do Superfund 101. You could do a very generic,
No,
you
no,
know.
I'm not saying that.
I think we're trying to take it a little bit deeper.
I'm not saying that. We've done a lot of work. We've met with town council. We've heard from EPA at a meeting that we understand that. And there's a lot that we know. It's not Superfund 101. It's NMI StarMet. We know a lot of specifics. Yeah, there's some general issues that we can apply here. So let's see where it goes. But I'm just, yeah, okay, one last comment, but I'm just saying, the reason why this is extended, because this review is gonna go through another iteration. And if the task force won't see that, till I get back to you and you consider that, and then we'll see that. That's not gonna happen for a bit.
Rather than reference the privileged communications, could you put the quotes you want to have together in one document and ask Mina to send it to the town as a contribution to this an appendix for the report that you could quote there?
I mean, I've wanted all along is to know from Mina what he considers privileged or not.
Okay.
And from that, we
And what I have always wanted to know is, what he believes would constitute revealing strategy, because he seems to be worried about that, so we need some guidance.
But if you've got those quotes.
Paul and I don't think there's anything in there that
There's-
does, but.
Everybody's worried about strategy. I've heard that. Nobody's given me one example, where there's anything strategic.
I'm not suggesting there is, I'm just.
But it keeps on swirling around for
Sure
reason
it
for
does.
review.
Yeah.
But, if somebody could point out, this is strategic, we don't want that in there, but it's not.
I mean, the bottom line is that the town council, my judgment, has to be comfortable with the representations we're making about the legal situation.
Yes, and he's gonna review the whole report.
And he's gonna read the whole report, but I don't think Cor felt comfortable not knowing what those basic documents of how much will rely, which of them are privileged or not. It could have been a very simple call by the town council months ago, but it wasn't made. So, here we are.
But you don't want to quote the whole
No, we're not.
document.
No,
You
we're
want to
not.
quote.
No.
So put a list of just the quotes you have and say,
We already
"Mina, can
have-
you say that?"
Okay, let's,
It's all there. It's
the,
black and
the
white.
town council's gonna review the whole report. It's gonna get a crack at it. This is,
Yeah.
anyway,
Our citations couldn't be clearer.
somebody's gonna
We
look.
have our own language in our section, it's.
So let me get back to timing, which is why I was fussing over timing before. So let's say we get this section here, I need some time, the section's gonna go out to the task force after my review, but it may need to go back to you before it goes on the task force. I won't step on your toes if there's some substantial suggestions,
I thought that was a general.
that may have to go to
Yeah.
you. So I'm optimistic that it gets out to the task force along with 11 and 14, the other chapters. By the 24th. We have a task force meeting. Our next one is on the 1st, and since we're at 10 after 8, we're not gonna make great headway on it, so we're gonna spend time on the 1st. Revisiting the recommendation, but I think we're gonna come up with the same situation, because we won't have the report finished to review, so we'll see where that goes, so that leads us to, October 1st. If we can get those sections finalized, they're submitted roughly October 8th. We have a chance on the 15th to discuss the report in its final entirety, because up until then, we're gonna be seeing drafts. So hopefully, on the 15th, you'll see a final report that this has not been edited and is not in production mode, so if, somewhere between the 8th and the 18th, I and others are gonna have to do some editing, I gotta work with Chris on that. Somewhere between the 21st to the 1st is really the final reviews, task force, external reviews, Mena's reviews, final comments, we kind of wrap it up. And so by November 8th, hopefully that's the meeting where we vote to release the report. It's not in production yet, but then at that point, okay, it's ready for production. Chris has identified an outside source to produce the report to make it look nice. It's gonna take 3 weeks or so, maybe a month to do that. So that takes us to December 1st.
Is the production that's way out in graphics? Is that what you
I'm
mean?
sorry,
You mean way out of the report, graphics?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just, so the previous version is going to be like this, the final version of things that are not totally ready for prime time. So we're out to December 1st. I need to ask the select board for an extension, which is one of the reasons I put that December 1st. I'm gonna ask them for a 30-day extension on that, because I think there's enough time in here with all the pieces to get that done, so it won't be November 1st, it'll be December 1st. But I just want you to appreciate the pieces of the back and forth, and, you know, I want you guys to have an opportunity to see this and finally to vote on it. When we vote on the final motion, we'll talk about it as we go. So that's the proposed schedule. If you have any comments now or, you know, afterwards, you can email Chris, it's fine. But right now we're proceeding here. Well, hopefully we can kind of move it along.
So my question about the schedule was how I thought that the reason they picked the November date for the report in the first place was because if they were going to decide to spend some money on this, they would want to know in time to get it into the budget for town meeting. Right now, the only money that we're really saying specifically to this project that they might want to be spending on would be legal fees,
Correct.
right? But we are suggesting that they put those legal fees into the budget for 25-26, right?
Correct. And look, the select board, I don't know if Terry's on them, they know what the intent is, you know, they can hear the meeting, they know we're headed towards a recommendation that has town council involved, and so they probably need to budget that. When they actually start that process is up to them, the timing of that, but, you know, I think there's no secrets here.
They're gonna have the full text content of the report. Right, by the end of October. It won't look pretty,
Yeah,
but they'll have, there won't be.
well, it'll be draft, we haven't released
I mean,
it.
there might be,
Yeah.
but the select board can still know what we're recommending and saying by that point.
And they're going to know. I mean, look, at the League of Women Voters next week, I'm not gonna say we vote on anything. We're gonna say we're considering a draft motion for additional recommendation. Yeah, this meeting is a public meeting, this is what we've done, so, yeah, we haven't voted on it yet, so. So that's that, and that sort of defines the process here. This has one additional, well, it doesn't, the last meeting I think we had on the calendar was the 15th. I don't know if we had the November 8th, so this has at least one more meeting on it, we may need to, so just, yeah, I think that the next meeting is probably not our last one. Okay. Now, we have, the plan was to kind of go through the report, slide through, whatever. You've seen the drafts, you've commented on the drafts. There's some new pieces that have just come in. David has some slight revision on the risk communication. I have added something onto section 9 a little bit at the end, but I think mostly you have in your packet here what we're gonna discuss. I thought the best way of doing this would be if Chris could put it on the screen, we could go through that And the authors should capture the comments as we go here. The reason why we're doing, open meeting law, requires that we do this in group, that we don't do this with serial deliberation back and forth amongst a group of us. That's what we're doing here. It's a little bit, gonna be a little bit clunky, but we'll see if we can get through it. Chris, I'm not sure if you want to make changes on the fly here, or whether you want the authors to make changes in their hard copy, or some combination.
Yeah, whatever works, we can do live changes, I can have comments and then send them back to the author for incorporation.
Can you blow that up?
Will you go through the entire report now?
Oh, well, we're not gonna stay up to midnight. We're gonna have to continue. Let me just get a sense, should we go until 9 o'clock?
9 o'clock would be, I would like to be meeting at 9.
Okay, we'll go to 9 o'clock. We'll see as far as we can get here. You have the.
Well,
hard
I
copy.
do have to drop at 8:30.
I'm sorry, Kurt.
Kurt has to go at 8:30.
Okay,
Might wanna get to the risk section before he has to leave.
okay, yeah, why don't we do that? Let's start with the risk section. Which is. Section 5.
Do you have
Starts
a
on page 9.
By the way, this report is looking like it's gonna be under 70 pages. It's great. Okay, Rich,
Yeah, I've said this to David, and I know he doesn't agree, but I think this is well written, and I don't disagree with anything it says. I kind of wanted a little more information rather than putting everything to the appendix, because the appendix is, the Rue report is overwhelming. And I'm not sure how many people who have a concern will really get through it. And the things I thought I would like to see are, one, to show how thoroughly the site has been planned. Simply to use that slide that Bruce uses all the time that shows where all the sample sites.
Chris, do you have comments?
Yeah,
you put
it looks like,
I think your comments.
I sent an email, but it looks like Chris has put them in the document.
if-
But
if
what
you-
I wanted to do was just have a discussion. I may be way off base here, and I don't wanna make things difficult for David and Chris. And I also thought we need to do a little more plain English discussion of the methodology. There's a lot there. In particular, what chemicals of concern were identified. And also, one statement that I've thought about recently is we were told they didn't find any PFAS. I think we ought to say that if that's true.
No,
That's not true.
It's not true.
It's not true, okay?
It's not true.
Leave it, but it's below threshold, right?
Well, there's no cleanup criteria for,
And they also.
For PFAS in soils. They're just-
Okay.
No, but there is actually one chemical that is now, one PFAS chemical that's now regulated by the federal government that was not tested for. They're going to do more testing, and it's gonna be out in the next,
Peace.
in the next water sampling in a year, and at that point, there'll be a discussion about whether there's a chemical concern to deal with, because it is a matter that if it's in the drinking water, that there is a drinking water limit. There's no limit on exposure just by touching.
But PFAS itself is a huge category of things. They're only testing for small.
Well, they only tested for like 100, and one of them wasn't one of the ones that the state is. The government said.
For those that the EPA has identified and created methodologies for.
But yeah, so it's not a chemical of concern yet, but it may become a chemical of concern as far as the water is concerned.
So I think PFAS, I don't know where, PFAS is a good example of how EPA is gonna handle things that they didn't anticipate. I mean, this is another point that has to be negotiated, but what if in the future, and you mentioned this in your chapter, that if chemicals are found, well, EPA is gonna take responsibility. We have to negotiate, we have to get that in writing, but, you know, right now, they're taking responsibility for PFAS. If they find something 5 years from now and they monitor, it's their responsibility. That has to be in writing, has to be an agreement, but that's that's the task force's understanding right now. So,
Or what,
we won't know till it's,
what the regulatory profile of the particular contaminant is when EPA finally regulates it. That may determine how those sorts of contaminants are dealt with in the future. I mean,
Yeah.
there are those that are beyond the negotiations.
Kurt, you wanna say something?
I was just going to suggest we clearly articulate that as an uncertainty as a position with regards to emerging contaminants such as PFAS. It's clearly going to be chemicals other than PFAS that are going to be considered in the future. So I think it comes into play in the uncertainty section.
This is an interesting problem because this has happened before. There was a record of decision, and the record of decision did not include 1,4-dioxane as a chemical of concern.
Yep.
And then they changed the limits of 1,4-dioxane, basically the technology changed so they could detect lower levels of it. And they added a pump and treat system to treat 1,4-dioxane at the site. And they are functionally doing the same thing with PFAS right now.
Yeah.
And it's a moving target, and there isn't a target now, but there will be eventually.
And as our report indicates in several places, as I recall, PFAS is just one of a category of things that are covered in what Kurt says. Uncertainties are the responsibility of going forward in the future. That's addressed in a broad way, not chemical. That's it.
Whether it's, just saying, whether it's in this chapter or this and the legal chapter, this issue of what happens in the future, it has to be fairly clear whose responsibility that is. It also has to be clear that that understanding has to be negotiated, and anything, right, until you have it in writing that we, the town, is not
Also,
gonna
I
be
think it may
responsible.
depend on the way the regulatory structure rolls out with respect to newly discovered chemicals.
I want that to be clear, either the risk chapter, the legal chapter, both, I think, because this emerging contaminant thing keeps coming up. And I think there has to be some clarity on just what we know right now. Okay?
Yeah.
Because
It's
we're
not
making
going away.
recommendations.
The technology is just getting better and better to detect chemicals at even lower levels. So the issue is not going away, that's for sure.
Yeah,
I think, also, that's an issue that the town faced with every piece of property it owns,
exactly.
right? I mean, it's not
Yeah.
a problem that's unique to this property.
But it's nice that we won't have responsibility for it if this is the property where it
Right.
shows up on.
Okay.
But I actually wanted to say,
We hope for
We
the
hope so.
negotiation.
No more
hope so.
PFAS, no
We
more
hope so.
PFAS.
I just,
I want to get back to this chapter.
I'd like to address Richard's point about, his comment about what we should improve in the chapter.
Go ahead.
Correct me, Kurt and Pam, if I'm wrong, but listing the chemicals of concern, there were hundreds.
there were hundreds that they tested for.
Correct, and what Rich is suggesting is listing what they tested for. So
Yeah.
my opinion is that that's appendix material, not main report material. It's long, it's a lot of names, it's in route. It's in route. There was another suggestion that Rich made that I'd like to follow up on with all of you, which was when we, several of us were concerned about, remember the route presentation showed some numbers over 1 and below 1. And I helped us understand the methodology, you know, how they did the threshold stuff. Explaining that in a simple paragraph and adding that to the risk chapter. Now, I've done that, but not in the risk chapter yet. I have a
You
paragraph.
did it in a memo to me or in an email to me.
Yes, it was
very
emailed to you, but I've synthesized it even further into the proposed messages in the risk communication plan. And there is a paragraph that does that. And I can just, and with Kurt's, he's the co-author, he's the main author of this chapter, I can just embed that in as an explanation of how they got to those zeros in that important chart at the end of the chapter, if you think.
That would be
helpful.
helpful.
And I would want to point out that I would also like to see one of the points that you have in the risk communication be a discussion of emerging contaminants.
Yeah.
As that whole
Yeah,
story
okay.
about what happened with 1,4-dioxane and whatever goes there as opposed to here.
Yeah, that was the point. 1,4-dioxane PFAS are good examples, what happens to
Yeah.
them. As far as the chemicals, They are, I think that in Ruth's chapter, that, you know, there are goals and endpoints for DU, for PCBs, for 1,4-dioxane, for VOCs. There's only a limited number of chemicals where they're really.
In the end, yes, but what Richard was initially suggesting, if I understand it correctly, is what they test for, and that was a big wide field at the beginning of the rod process.
Yeah,
That's a long
Are the
list.
chemicals that the COC is the ones, well, the list that they're focused on, is that list in here, this shorter list? I don't know,
I wouldn't put it in the text, I mean, my first thought was a table, but I see your point, if they tested for hundreds. It just, I guess what I was trying to get across is what impresses me is how much information they have on the site. And if you wade through Root, you do see that. But I was just trying to find a way, that's why I was thinking of a map with all the sample sites on it, to show, yeah, we really have tested for a lot of chemicals in a lot of places. We know we got problems, but that's why we think they're manageable. That's all I was.
And let me add to that I also have in proposed messages in the risk communication plan, details of all, how many samples they did, 8,185, 8,000 cubic yards have been removed, there's just a bunch of those details. We can add them in, we were voting for short and sweet.
yeah, I think the number of samples is good, but you know, the number of samples dates back to, where do you start and where do you stop?
2003 to 2024, I have that, but that's as of now, and there'll be more.
What's
But
important,
the point that Rich is making is to go into detail to reassure that the substantial work that's gone into what we're saying.
Yeah, that's all, I mean, that's why I thought, just that, the thing that always impresses me is the map of the whole testing site, you know. My God, there's a sample site every quarter inch.
Maybe that would actually be a pretty graphic to put in here.
Yeah.
it'd be, well, which dots, which sampling period, the RI, I think the most important data here are the data that Rue has been using for the risk assessment. And, you know, they've shown us maps of that, and maybe, I think, you know, why don't you guys think about what a useful, aside from the numbers, is there a map which shows? And Rue's not using data from 2000, you know, from the RI, they're using relevant data for the risk, so I think it's the relevant data set that's worth putting on a map, whatever that is.
I do think this didn't quite make the point that I like about this, which is everybody's been doing. DEP did studies of this site, EPA did studies of risk studies of this site. We're paying for this one. This is our risk assessment of this site. It is, you know, one thing that I sort of want to make upfront is this is us doing our due diligence, not just trusting EPA to have made the right risk decisions, not just trusting DEP to have made the right risk decisions. So that would be a nice.
That's a good point, because it was a contractual obligation to and with the town.
Yeah,
It's a very good point, I think.
Yeah.
But
I-
there's another one in risk communication messaging that I had.
The framing
Over
was
there.
in here, Kurt, I think we jumped right into it, that's good, but I think just stepping back and talking about the risk work that has been done, but this one is ours, this one's the independent work, which focuses on the future, what the site's gonna look like. I think you say some of that, but I think.
in the methodology, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, we can emphasize it more, that's for sure.
But emphasizing that there's been plenty of people who've done risk studies on this site. This is us, yeah.
Sure. Any other, I mean, I think you have the whole report here, I think summarizing this in bullets, I think it's really good. Coming up with the bottom line is really important. And the conclusions, I think that was well stated, although there's a comment down there from.
One last question, David, the 1 in 100,000, that means over a lifetime, there will be one more case of cancer of all types in the population of 100,000 people.
Cancer of all types, yes.
So, I mean,
The lifetime is an open question. I've been, Kurt should answer this and what's technically more than me, but I've been asking Karen Nierenberger about that. And Rue, Nancy Netherlands about that. And it's an open question as to whether 70 years or a lifetime is used. And in fact, and Pam urged me to look into this. The, number used for the thresholds, you know, or the ratio, 26 years. That's the one that's baked into the math that Ariel used.
Yep.
So it's all over the place, in other words, that's the non-cancer. So, mushy is the answer to your question.
Yeah, I guess what I'm looking for is getting across to people, look. You know, a third of you are gonna get cancer in your lifetime. You know, 33,000 out of 100,000, is this only 33,001 out of 100,000?
It's,
Yeah, the problem with that is,
yeah.
or is if you're the one, that one's too high.
Yeah, no, I know, but still, you know.
It's
I'd
really,
like-
it's really more for an individual. So like a hypothetical resident, their baseline is 0.33 chance of getting cancer. And if you're at this site, it's 0.330001, I think is the math. So it's
I
very,
think
very
that's
small.
what-
Nice thing to say.
That's what I'd like to see said.
Yeah.
That would be the thing to say.
Yeah, that makes a big difference to me, you know.
It
I mean,
does. It's very insignificant.
you know,
Triple E is
and- and
different.
My example, it's probably more dangerous to be an airline pilot or a stewardess for your whole career.
Well, I like the number better than comparing it to other.
Yeah, no, I'm not,
of the
but the
tracks.
number would be.
Speaks for itself.
the number would
Any
be-
other comments for on section 6?
Kurt, I'll get back to you with these suggested solutions,
So it's actually section.
and we'll work them in together, huh?
Right.
Sounds good.
So I have a comment that's not really substantive, it's more like editing wise, but it actually probably fits with chapter 2, the introduction. Before we start using terms like in the cooling pond and the sphagnum bog, or, you know, this chemical. In the introduction, I think we need to. Because, you know, the reuse chapter comes after this, and we haven't introduced what the sphagnum bog is in the cooling pond, so like, I think up in the introduction, there needs to be.
It's gonna be glossary.
Okay, I still think when we get into chapter 2, there needs to be a high level paragraph that introduces the geography of the site
Yeah, that's probably.
and.
So you
when we
think
get
that
to
should be at the end of the introduction, there should be a quick description of what the site.
I think in section 2, there's a background section and.
Yeah, okay.
You know, so I don't know if you're moving to section 2 now, but I think for this section, there needs to be some additional context and I have.
Maybe that's the
recommendations.
first thing, this is the site. introduced
Actually, I want to-
geography.
I want to turn to section 6 next. I want to kind of go through the worksheet section before we go to the other pieces. I'll just say one thing, if I really liked about 6 is the way it's structured. I like the bolding of the topic sentences. I think and so chapter authors, if you can take a look at 6 and see how Rich and Gary have sort of highlighted important points all along. Which I think I've seen before in your work. I think see if that's useful to your section.
I mean,
Okay.
highlighting the whole
I think,
sentence.
wouldn't it be easier to agree on that and have an editor do that?
That's
When
editing,
they
that's-
do
yeah,
the final
that's-
formatting of.
Yeah, okay.
No, everyone's gonna implement it.
Formatting
different
visuals,
ways,
yeah.
And someone's gonna have to redo it anyway.
Smart.
That's fine, but an editor may not know what the main point is, turning over technical work to editors. It's a 50-50 proposition. If you can do it, you know, fine. If not, if you want to wait, that's fine too. But I want to talk about the reuse. Chapter, so just really, the only comment that I had. Was. You talk about where was it, the private uses upfront, oh. So starting at page 17. So first you talk about several ownership scenarios, but then when you start talking about uses. You get right into private sector and then other private sector uses. At the bottom of 18 is the first time you talk about desirable municipal uses. I'd like you just to consider moving that paragraph up front to have the desirable municipal uses sort of lead the section, because you talk about private use, private, no, so you get municipal. And yet you're you know, the range of uses kind of start with municipal, so just think about that. The way it read, I read
I also,
private use, private sector, and then municipal at the bottom of 18. I just thought it was,
So the desirable direct municipal uses could include, and you think that should be moved up?
I just thought it'd be more appropriate because I think that's kind of where the town is headed. They want to think about municipal first and then private second, or I think, so.
I also wondered about, that you only put indoor recreation under private uses and not
Yeah,
wholly municipal use. I think it should be under both, because it's two different kinds of, it's,
Okay. So,
I mean, it's theoretically possible, I guess. Part of what we were hearing was that the FinCom was averse to major new town-funded activities. And therefore that recreation, if you're gonna have a building as opposed to just playing
Right, I mean-
fields or something, that would.
playing fields was the very first municipal use that we listed, so, but you
right,
mean.
I'm talking about indoor recreation and, you know, that actually links to one of the other things, which is at the end, when you're talking about the Peabody school closure.
Mhm.
So,
Under uncertainties, yeah.
yeah, that's under uncertainties. So Peabody is one of those situations where it's a school that needs a phenomenal amount of capital input into it. It might be cheaper to use it for a little while as one thing and not improve it, and then build fresh at Starmet. And that's the kind of thing that you need to think about when you're thinking about how much something is gonna cost.
town's gonna sell people.
Hmm?
The town is gonna sell people.
Yeah, but they might wanna stage some programs there for a little while until they can build something at
They're
Starmet.
actually doing it right now.
That's not really.
And there's a playing field that's kind of. So, I don't think Peabody is a great example, but with the need for indoor recreation.
Right.
It's,
Can I make just a comment on your comment about FinCom? I for one don't think we should be responsive to FinCom comments in particular in terms of drafting our report. FinCom is an advisory group that I've been on, and I just think if we are relying on FinCom in a way that is sort of creating our,
Okay,
I would not do that.
okay, what I'd suggest is the bullet under public uses, read recreation fields and or indoor facilities.
Indoor recreation.
It's sort of the theme of leading with the municipal needs in here, and having, private development as appropriate, revenue development is included, but I'm gonna start with the municipal part, because that's your first reuse scenario.
Also, it's a really nice way to begin, I think, I think the municipal uses are compelling for this.
Well, yeah, but I would argue housing uses are compelling too. And that's not usually thought of as municipal. I think it can be done if the town acquires the site with a long-term lease. But most people don't think of housing as a municipal use, and yet I think it's the most compelling need in this town.
Yeah.
Which is why you lead with it.
Yeah, right.
However, again, this is something that I don't
It's gonna
think,
be controversial.
I don't think we examined this. It might be better to build housing, you mentioned it, at Kai's Road.
Absolutely.
And then use use this facility for the Kai's
It's not,
Road.
that's not our charge.
and the
That's not
same-
our charge.
Right, I think what we're trying to get a sense from the committee is, do we lead with the municipal uses or do we lead with the private uses? They're both options, and what we're trying to say in this section is not to pick a specific use, and not to prioritize one over the other, but to say they're both options. So does it matter which one we lead with versus which, we mentioned them both. Paul has expressed an opinion that we should lead with I'm okay with
I
that,
would agree with that.
I agree with Paul's.
so.
And I think what
That'll be
you're
the first
gonna, I think you're gonna end up with some hybrid here. You're gonna end up with municipal use, and there will be some housing, and there will be some private. development that will be ground leases. I think that's where we end up, but.
Done, but yeah, we have them all listed and we are presenting it and trying to present it in a way that.
Other comments on the chapter?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so, under housing. You say housing and particularly senior housing remains the most prominent use. I think it might be sensible to actually mention that Mass Development said that they would be funding housing, that, in other words, that's where people are going to find funding for housing is for large scale development.
There are multiple sources of funding, as development,
Yeah.
not necessarily the most.
They were
important,
among
not
one,
necessarily
yeah,
quality.
and we talked about annexes, but there will be a summary of all of these interviews in the annex.
Okay, but so the point was
Yeah.
that housing is likely to be there, not just because we all need it, but because builders are likely to find public funding for it. No?
That
Depending
depends
on
on the
what-
type of housing.
Yeah.
And what limits you put on it,
If you
they
wanna
could
put up,
fund it totally private.
if our zoning were to allow McMansions, I'm sure there would be private, fully private.
Yeah.
People willing to come in and build $2 million homes there,
Okay, what I
but we're not.
What I take away from this, and I think Carrie and I are comfortable with this, is we'll put municipal first. I would not change the graphic,
No, no.
which actually starts with the town and ends with private. But we can put municipal first. And then
On page 18, when you have those bullets, I think you should mention these aren't in any necessary priority order, you know. People confer that DPW facilities last, it's a little bit of a.
In no particular.
In no particular order.
Okay,
And the recreation facilities on the private use, I believe, is indoor recreation facility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we'll put that in.
well, right, private uses, yeah.
So, the other thing is under uncertainties. You described site-wide authorized reuse approval. It's site-wide ready for anticipated use. That's SFWRAU. And yeah, it's still pronounced Swaru, but that's,
It's SWARE.
no.
Site-wide ready
So
for
EPA's
reuse.
website is SWRAU.
RAU.
What's in there, I pulled from EPA's website, so if it's wrong.
Okay,
What is the U then?
The next review.
well, maybe that's a different place than I'm finding it.
Reuse.
Use, site-wide ready
Oh,
for
yes, yes, reuse.
anticipated use,
Site-wide ready for.
anticipated use.
Okay. Other comments? Questions? But by the way, if you can take these comments and according to the schedule, which I don't think I circulated that, if you can kind of get that back in the hopper, as soon as you can revise these, but, anything else on section 6?
Well, again, I still thought you should talk about Peabody also being a swap kind of place as opposed to.
Why don't we
We
mention
mentioned
Peabody?
it as an uncertainty. I had actually something, if people are okay with it, and it's in the same section. Or actually, no, I didn't put it in the uncertainty section. Right before figure 8.4, the need for specialized housing was also confirmed for this site. You see that paragraph?
Yep.
Council on Aging indicated blah, 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 figure 6.4 shows, independent analysis of likely growth and older folks. And then I was gonna have as the next sentence, tell me if you don't like it, but while the recent announcement of land acquisition opens up plans for additional senior living at Newbury Court and within the potential redevelopment of MCI Concord and the adjacent Junction Village parcel, the need for affordable senior housing is anticipated to outstrip this limited supply. I wanted to mention the fact that, you know, Newbury Court they've just got 18 acres and they are planning on doing more senior housing, but it's not likely to be affordable if you've ever been to Newbury Court. And that the Junction Village one,
Needless to say, we intend to negotiate on that. Because they're gonna have to change the
I
zoning.
think that's fine and kind of reinforces
it's
the,
basically just saying
Yeah,
like,
sure.
that, you
I
know,
don't have a problem.
for those naysayers who would be like, oh, we already have 2 places for senior living. Like, the
Yeah.
point of this chart, figure 6.4, is that we're gonna outstrip that need, so.
I think it reinforces that
I think
third,
that's good.
third bullet, you know, doing multi-site planning, yeah. That should be in it.
Gary, you have that language, or you want to send it to me?
Yeah, I mean, been providing and
Anything else on 6?
And then you see that there's 2 annexes that we were planning. One is the summary of the interviews. And the other is the zoning table. We have Skio working on it now. I think I shared, I don't know, I guess it didn't go out to the committee, but we have developed a draft list of allowed uses that we would recommend for the site.
We're not saying do it, we're saying apparent demand and safe.
What's that?
I said, we're not saying do this, it's an extensive list of things for which there appears to be some demand in this for
Yeah.
private, and that is consistent with the list assessment.
Well, if you could send it out.
Yeah, but right now Skio is looking to see if we can streamline it because again, Pam, not that we're being responsive to the planning board, but they did say if you could, you know, simplify the planning requirements, it would be great. So we're trying to see if we can, although we have specific ideas about what allowed uses we think may or may not be appropriate for zones A1 through A4, C1 and C2, D, and holding basin B. Because of other restrictions on the site, like institutional controls or annul, it may not be necessary to restrict these other uses over the holding basin. Nothing else is gonna be allowed on holding basin anyway. So we don't need to have special zoning for area D. So we're hoping that we can come up with a way between wetlands protection, between institutional controls, and between other limitations on the site in terms of some planning, zoning bylaw things, that we may be able to streamline it down to one allowed list of zoning for the entire site, which would really simplify things for the planning board.
So
If we
you,
could make that case, so we're.
so you included a description of the master plan in your section, right? Do
Yes.
you think that there is a reason to have this executive summary from the master plan as an annex? Paul's trying to get rid of annexes, so my question is,
Somebody with the reuse report?
or the reuse report, yeah.
But the reuse reports, it's one of these things, it's
It's
available.
It's listed, you wanna get, I'm saying, you wanna eliminate annexes, you're saying,
I'm
I've
saying,
got it covered, we
And
don't
look,
need any.
it's up to the authors, I'm just saying, let's, you know.
we're
keep it
proposing 2
consistent.
annexes, that's not one of them.
Okay, so getting rid of that annex? Yeah,
But I mean,
that's,
That's a story.
we didn't come up with that list, I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Paul put that down.
but
as-
that, but
that's-
I'm saying,
Oh,
you think you've got that covered.
That's fabricated list, the one at the end.
Yeah, but I'm
Yes.
just trying to cross things up.
No, we're recommending 2
We're gonna come up
annexes.
with a new list.
And so yours is the interviews and the,
And zoning, I don't think is in there.
Call it zoning.
Do you have the pollinator meadow mentioned here? It doesn't?
Thought so.
we also don't have the town trails listed as one of the things that's,
No,
that's raised the site, isn't
It's in the beginning of our chapter.
So just check the pollinator meadow on the holding
it? A
basin.
little,
And tables 1, 2, and 3, have we seen tables 1, 2, and 3, were they appended to? The
Oh, no, it's what Carl used for his work, so, right, we need to develop that, but.
Okay.
yeah, no, you have that,
And I-
you don't have
It's
it.
my early,
listed
I split tables 1, 2, 3, I'd like tables 3, just like
in section
municipal first.
Findings, you don't have it listed as a finding of a use that is.
We just need to make sure it's
recommended.
consistent with his chapter, because he.
I guess that was because we took it as a,
Really cost.
given as a constraint, just
Yeah,
like,
I don't know.
just like you can't build on the whole.
Okay, can we move, this isn't the last time you guys will see this report and comment on it. But this is just gonna keep us going. How about section 7, town as an owner, ownership issues, obligations, costs, and revenues?
In 11 minutes.
One comment on first sentence, it references these parties lease and develop, but it begs the question of what parties? So maybe we should be that specific, these parties,
I'm sorry,
right here.
Yes, it's right at the top.
oh, yeah. And you say from users of the site.
Page 22, yeah. Should these parties lease and develop?
Should the town, well, right,
Should parts of the site, should parts of the site be, leased and developed? Without pointing to parties that you haven't pointed to.
yeah.
Other comments?
The institutional controls, they're handled in multiple places. I just.
What's that, Sue?
I'm looking at page 24, findings, is that, I'm saying,
Well, this is where, for me, this is the hard, because this is where you say the town has to manage it. I think your chapter, if you're gonna mention, has to just have the right 5 listed. I think it's like 5, so,
We can mention.
I don't know, you know, wherever you can reference another
It's just gonna
chapter.
be brief, it's gonna be part of compliance for liability, management, but the detail can show up right here, there it is.
So are you saying there is enough detail to cover the legal information in this already by describing the nulls, the notice of
I'm saying
activity?
this goes into more detail than we do in our draft.
But we also have another chapter,
Then-
managing institutional
I was
control.
just curious about how, because chapter 12 is institutional control management.
Yeah, we're gonna get
And
to that,
we're referring to it. I mean,
This is mentioning, I don't know if there's any redundancy here, this mentions that the town has to manage those, I think.
So it's
Suggestions
not
for how to do that
It's not redundant.
come later.
I mean, it's within the context of the town as owner, right?
Yes.
This is what its responsibilities.
But with extensive discussion of the management on page 39.
This 39 is the recommendation.
Yeah, and on 24, it says a recommended plan for the system presented in section 7, 11 of the report. I mean,
Whereas this is the findings, not the recommendation.
No, the recommendation how to manage. Yeah, I see.
Section 7, though, that we're looking at is the recommendation.
Well, I know, we're talking about institutional controls where there's a mention. I think the legal section should just refer to this, or rather take a space mention.
Yeah, I would say so, definitely.
I think actually in the legal section, I would love to see a part that reiterates that we are not responsible for maintaining the institutional controls unless we, you know, come into some other legal.
We're not responsible for maintaining it.
Well, we're not responsible
Yeah.
we're not responsible for maintaining the pump and treat system or.
That's not institutional controls, that's operate,
Right,
O&M, operation and maintenance is different from ICs.
We're responsible for making sure the institutional controls stay in place and don't get disturbed, essentially.
I don't know where this is clear, but we have to make sure that O&M is really clearly different from institutional controls. To your point, that this EPA is responsible to maintain remediation systems. It's the town's responsibility not to damage those systems.
Yeah, maybe to make that distinction, remediation systems versus institutional.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
so Carl,
Just gonna get away scot-free here with
there's 2 annexes that are associated with your thing, the summary of interviews with town staff about needs and costs.
No, that's.
That's us.
That's
Yeah, the two for me, one, there's a memo on funding sources, which isn't per se related to the chapter, well, I summarized it. I think that's worth keeping. I'm not sure the slide deck is needed.
Okay,
The what?
The slide deck when I presented it.
You think you got the cost estimate?
I've
stuff on the
summarized
tape?
it, I've summarized it in this chapter, so I think that could be deleted.
So the memo on what?
On funding sources,
Funding sources. So, okay, so I'm confused then, there's a summary of interviews of developers and public-private partnerships that I saw go by. And then there's a summary of interviews with town staff about needs and costs, and you're saying only one of them is,
They're combined in a single end.
okay.
We have both in the same end.
Okay, and what do you know about insurance? It's in there right now.
right, yeah, Chris wrote up a good summary of it, and then I added the costs into the
Okay,
annual operating cost.
Can we say that publicly, or can we show it there?
what do you
We
want?
can't identify the company. We can't identify the company.
Is the company in there?
No,
This draft piece that we're looking at right now. Other people can't see that, right? Or is it up there?
Yeah, we can see
Okay.
it's being shared.
So you can see that the cost was $27,000 a year.
Yeah.
For the insurance.
Okay, I think we will stop there. We're gonna resume in 2 weeks. We'll revisit all the fun topic we had earlier.
So if we have small, like typographical suggestions or grammar suggestions, we can send those back to the original author. Like I can send Carl my line edits on his chapter, or is that not?
Well, I think you can.
you can, although, I mean, if it would be then it'll be hard if I get 6 different versions.
No, I know, that's
That
fine.
doesn't really
And
need
I
to-
apologize, I missed the deadline, so I edited all of the report, but I did it after.
I mean, it should be good to have a hard deadline, so that
Yeah.
I can wait till I get, various edits and know that I have all the edits, and then.
Do you have any
And an editor is supposed to catch the grammar
So,
and stuff.
Yeah.
The periods out of place.
No, but if
Supposed
it's
to be a
starting,
comma.
if it's starting off a little cleaner, that's better.
Yeah.
So are you allowed to share this draft with us? Because I noticed for sections 1, 2, and 3, you've already made some differences compared to what went out.
Oh, for sure. So you have it here, you've been sharing,
Well, for people who want to make more comments.
This is now a public document.
Yeah,
if you want to make more comments, send them back to the authors.
Yep.
Look, we set up a process which is a little bit, it strains everything, but, we're trying not to have deliberations in quorum, so I think comments on chapters, grammatical and otherwise, things you should include, things not, I think it's perfectly fine, in my opinion. Yes, Chris? Yes, okay, good.
Well, it's my intent not to try and detail each of these comments in the minutes, but rather that they just say that,
Right.
summarize the discussion and say comments
That-
will return to the authors.
There's this new versions of a couple of chapters, and I guess Chris will send those out.
I think
You sent them out.
Yeah, I think these are section 6, section 9, and section 13.
Okay, 9 is
Second, was one of those the risk section? I don't even know what the hell number.
Yeah, sorry, that's.
risk communication.
Okay, so don't send that out, because now with these comments, I'm gonna revise it again. The changes that I made were simply adding some quantities into, there were in parentheses, how many feet of dirt had been removed. I had filled in those blanks. Those are the changes that I sent out earlier today. But these modifications that we discussed tonight will also be added. So don't confuse things by sending out that one I sent out earlier.
Have
Just had two of
you
these.
seen the comments that Pam Hill and Rocky put on your chapter?
Yes,
Okay, so
yes.
you consider those two, okay.
So Paul, is October 8th when the chapter drafts with final set of revisions by the authors are done? Is it?
That'd be great.
It's all draft final sections and comments submitted to the chair.
Yeah. and
So
we'll
that's
shoot
it. So if task force members are gonna send authors comments, I'd say like the first or the second, there needs to be a closure date on when people give authors comments so that they can wrap it up by the end.
The task force has had these for a while, and there's no reason why you can't get
Right.
your initial comments to the authors right away.
Yeah,
There'll be another set, we assemble it, there'll be another iteration of that, but. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
let's try to hit the deadlines.
yeah, I'd like to say anything that the people said today or, have details, please send it by the end of the week. And then, we ought to be able to turn it around next week. I haven't heard
The
that.
comments that you've heard today,
Yeah.
you don't need people to resend those to you, do you?
No, I've already incorporated them in a
Okay.
draft, so I'm ready to send it.
No, not, and I'm talking about the one comments that were made tonight, were people that hadn't commented before.
Okay. There's an executive summary still to be drafted, talk about waiting, I guess I can draft that. As well, so I'm gonna draft the executive summary, I will, I guess I'll draft the thorough draft, here, I'll draft the recommendations in the next steps. Shall get those out.
Yeah.
So we have.
I think it'd be good for everybody to see all the
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
I think we have enough information to write it all down and have a complete draft.
Okay. Public comment,
Well, yes.
would you like to make a comment?
I'm James, I live on Walden Terrace, for over 40 years. I am a licensed insurance advisor. My concerns over these several years have been the liability to the town. And to clarify, not the liability for the cleanup. I'm not concerned with that, nor have I heard anyone who was. So liability to the town at the point of acquisition, for the acquisition, and for all operations following it. I also am concerned with the liability of the professional people, legal and insurance professionals, who are advising the town on the acquisition of the property. Concord is known as a very sophisticated and hard contract negotiator. And so it's my recommendation to this body and to our officials to read very carefully and understand every word of the acquisition document and every word of the insurance document for the 2229 Main Street site. I don't think, in this case, Concord would get a do-over. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Any other comments? I saw Terry Ackerman was on for a bit. I don't know if she's still here. Any other comment? Oh, there she is. Hi. Hi, Terry.
Hi, I'm sorry I missed most of your meeting, had a conflict with another meeting, but excellent progress as usual. And if you're a few weeks late with the deadline, if you think, we can easily extend that, just let us know. It's much more important to get a thorough, thoughtful document that you're all happy with. The deadline is pretty artificial, really. So just keep doing what you're doing, and when it's ready, we will be thrilled to have it.
Thanks, Terry. I will be talking to you about a specific extension of the deadline. But one thing though that I have here, we did review section 11, which is the institutional control management. There are a lot of, some of the task force had comments, and I think maybe you did as well. There are a lot of specifics in there. And it's pretty descriptive, like a recommendation that the building commissioner do something. Would you prefer we back off and say, a recommendation is that a responsible staff member be selected and have the select board do that, or would you like our specific recommendation how to do that? Because there were some comments that maybe it's too descriptive as far as exactly.
I don't personally have a preference. I think it's the town manager is the one who's going to be deciding it. And, I did talk to her about whether she thought it was too specific. And she seems okay with it, but you might want to talk with Carrie and see, but it's really not up to me.
Yeah, but I just wanted your sense of it, because, look, it's a recommendation, the town manager can do something else different, but,
Right,
you know, we're not saying it has to be done this way, it can be done differently, so. I
Right.
thought we had to put something in there as a placeholder.
I mean,
Yeah.
you could kind of walk the middle line and put something like, we strongly recommend a specific staff member such as the building commissioners, or something
Yeah.
like that, if you want to walk in the middle. 'Cause,
Yeah.
But, the other thing I forgot to mention was the site visit. We got a lot of positive comments. Every single select board member was really, happy to have learned and seen the site. It's really gonna make it a lot easier when you come in with your report. I think we're all gonna know what you're talking about. It was really excellent.
Yeah, I talked a little earlier about the, good meeting that was and how well attended that was, so. I'm glad people learned a lot. Kathy, anything else? Okay, any other comments, public comments? Okay, meet again in 2 weeks. Have a good 2 weeks, look forward to seeing the new chapter and then I'm sure we'll be talking about more. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, good night.